Welcome to our channel. Today we will delve into the life of Joseph Stalin, but not the story you have already heard. Prepare yourself for shocking, unknown facts that will change everything you thought you knew about one of the most famous leaders in history. Let's uncover the secrets of the man who shaped the 20th century. You know, people think being the supreme leader of the Soviet Union hardens you. I ordered purges, I played chess with entire nations, I made the West nervous just by blinking. But nothing prepared me for what my wife Nadezhda did. Not the gulags, not Trotsky's ice pick, not even the Battle of Stalingrad. This was something else. Let me back up. I'm not here looking for sympathy. I'm not exactly husband of the year. And I'll admit that straight up. Power makes you cold. I get that. But with her, I let my guard down. Maybe that was my mistake. Nadezhda and I weren't what you'd call romantic. Our marriage was more like a series of tense diplomatic negotiations with vodka breaks. But I respected her. She was educated, sharp, and not afraid to call me out. Hell, sometimes that's what I liked most. Until she started getting too clever. The first sign was subtle. She changed her perfume. I know that sounds petty, but when you're as paranoid as me, and for good reason, little things jump out. She used to smell like lavender and iron. Then, one day, it was citrus and guilt. I remember walking into her dacha and thinking, who is this woman? Then came the late-night meetings. She'd say it was the Party Women's League or some health initiative. But the look in her eyes told me something was off. You ever watch someone lie so well it makes you question reality? That's what she did. Every damn time. Now, I've survived coups. I've survived Lenin's favor turning cold. But sitting across from her, pretending I believed her stories, made me feel like a fool, like some wide-eyed schoolboy from Gori all over again. But I wasn't sure yet. So I did what any jealous husband/dictator would do. I had her tailed. What my men found. That's when the descent began. But I'll get to that. The envelope was plain. No markings. Just a thick, official-looking seal with my own initials, which made it more disturbing. Because I didn't authorize it. My security chief handed it to me like it was radioactive. Maybe it was. Inside, 9 black and white photos, grainy but clear enough. And there she was. Nadezhda. My wife. The mother of my children. The one who once told me I needed to smile more so the peasants would stop having nightmares. She wasn't wrong, by the way. In one shot, she's sitting close to a man at a cafe in the city. Not too close, but close enough that their knees touched. Intimate. That kind of proximity where you don't need words because you already know what the other person wants. In the second, they're walking. No guards. No handlers. Just 2 people pretending they weren't being watched. But they were. And the third photo? That one made me physically ill. It was taken outside a discreet government apartment on Komsomolskaya. The kind they assigned for private meetings. He had his hand on her lower back. She was laughing. Like really laughing. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her since. Honestly, maybe never. And he was wearing my boots. Let that sink in. I had given those boots to my inner circle only. Custom leather, imported from Italy. Limited pairs. That meant whoever he was. He wasn't just some random Komsomol kid or factory worker. He was someone close. I stood there in my office, at my desk, gripping the edge so hard I left fingernail marks in the mahogany. Me. Joseph freaking Stalin. Leader of the USSR, reduced to some betrayed chump whose wife was laughing with another man behind his back. I didn't say anything for hours. Just stared at the last photo, flipping it back and forth like maybe it would reveal some different truth if I tilted it. But it didn't. It just stayed the same. My first thought, rage. My second, who is he? And my third, how many others knew? The emotional spiral that came after, shame, humiliation, the paranoia, was worse than any assassination attempt. I thought I had my country under control, but not even the walls of the Kremlin could protect me from this. You ever feel like you're the last person in the room to get the joke? That's how I felt walking into my next meeting with the Politburo. These were the men I'd purged enemies with, shared drinks with, fought wars beside. And now, one of them had touched my wife in a way that made my blood curdle. I didn't say anything at first, just watched, studied. I let the conversation roll along, some nonsense about industrial output and tractor quotas, while I quietly scanned every face. Molotov, Beria, Kaganovich, Khrushchev, and then my eyes landed on him. General M. I won't name him, not yet. Let's call him Misha. 38, former Red Army hero, tall, lean, spoke French for no reason other than to be smug. He had charm, I'll give him that. The kind of smile that made people trust him instantly. He also had a very distinct limp, from a minor bullet wound in the left leg during the Finnish War. And in the photo, the man with Nadezhda also had that limp. I knew. I just knew. I stared at Misha for a full minute. Didn't blink. He laughed at something Kaganovich said and clapped him on the back like nothing in the world was wrong. That was the moment I realized. This affair wasn't just personal, it was political. Because if he thought he could get away with seducing the general secretary's wife, then how many others thought I was losing grip? What rumors were already spreading behind closed doors? That Stalin had gone soft. That the bear of the East had become a tame house cat? I ended the meeting early with a fake cough and ordered Beria to stay behind. Say what you will about Lavrenti. He was a snake, sure, but he was my snake. Loyal to a fault. I handed him the photo. He didn't blink, just exhaled slowly and said, "Permission to handle this, privately?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I want to see how deep this rot goes. And I want you to keep your mouth shut." That night I sat in bed next to Nadezhda. She was reading a novel like nothing was wrong. Smelled like citrus again. My hands were shaking under the blanket, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of not grabbing her book and setting it on fire. "I missed you at lunch today," she said, not looking up. I smiled. "Busy with tractors," I replied. And that was that. My wife, lying through her teeth. My general, laughing at my table. And my own sanity starting to slip. Pretending to be clueless is harder than declaring war. Every second I had to sit across from Misha at military briefings, hear his smug little quips, or worse, watch him glance at my wife like she was a secret he already owned. I wanted to snap. But I didn't. Not yet. You can't just purge your wife's lover on impulse. Not when he's a rising star in the party. Not when you don't know who else is involved. And especially not when your own damn wife is the one sneaking out in the middle of the night and calling it committee business. So I smiled. I let him speak freely. I even made a show of congratulating him publicly after a military victory report. Gave him a medal. A medal. The whole room applauded. Nadezhda clapped, too. I saw her eyes dart toward him. He didn't look back. That was the first time I saw a crack. Because something was wrong. I thought he was still into her, but he wouldn't even acknowledge her presence. Cold. Professional. Mechanical. Which meant one of two things. He was trying to cover his tracks. She meant nothing to him, and she didn't know that. And that? That's when my anger started to twist into something worse, pity. Not for him. Not for me. For her. Because even now, even after all this, I could tell she believed he loved her. God, the irony. The wife of the most feared man in the world, thinking she'd found someone who truly saw her. Someone who didn't treat her like a political accessory. And yet, she'd been played. And it wasn't by me this time. So I started digging deeper. I told Beria to bug the apartment. Every room, every corner, hidden microphones, photo equipment, even a junior agent stationed inside the walls. Yes, inside. Don't ask. Within 3 nights, I had more intel than I knew what to do with. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just Misha. There was someone else. A second man. A voice from one of the recordings, laughing, calling her Nadezhda, kissing her hand, whispering about the fall of the bear. That voice? Khrushchev. You know how some betrayals make sense? Like, they fit the person. You nod and go, yeah, I saw that coming. This wasn't one of them. Khrushchev? That goofy little egg with the bad suits and the nervous sweat? The guy who once choked on a dumpling in a staff meeting? That guy was calling my wife Nadezhda and whispering about me being past my prime? I listened to the tapes 3 times. The first time, shock. The second, rage. The third, amusement, if you can believe it. Because here's the truth, Khrushchev's game wasn't sex. He wasn't smooth. He wasn't even remotely romantic. What he was doing with Nadezhda was emotional manipulation. He talked like some tragic poet, whispering sweet nothings about her being ignored, too brilliant for a tyrant, a mind wasted on marriage. Disgusting. He played the long game, complimented her ideas, encouraged her to write political essays, told her she was the real revolutionary. And she bought it. When I confronted him, I didn't do it with yelling. No fists. No accusations. I invited him to dinner. I made borscht myself. Poured the vodka. Made him comfortable. Kept the tone light. Halfway through the meal, I leaned in and said, "You know, Nikita, I've been thinking about betrayal." He froze. spoon halfway to his mouth. I kept going. Not the kind with guns. The kind with whispers. The kind that comes from under your roof. He went pale. Started to sweat. I swear I saw his left eye twitch. And then I smiled. Told him he should take a vacation. Told him I'd heard he was overworked. Suggested the Black Sea. He nodded so hard his jowls clapped. He left that night stumbling over his own feet. And I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed while Nadezhda brushed her hair like nothing in the world was crumbling. You're quiet tonight, she said. Thinking about the sea, I told her. She smiled. She had no idea what storm was coming. I'll be honest. There's a part of me that wanted to scream. To rip the covers off her at 2 a.m., shove the tape recorder in her face, and ask her who the hell she thought she was playing with. But I didn't. I let her keep lying. Every morning, she'd kiss me on the cheek, offer a stale smile, and head off to committee work. And every evening, I'd welcome her back like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, I was reassigning people. Misha? Gone. Transferred to a logistics post in Siberia. Not arrested, yet, but just far enough that he'd feel the cold settling into his bones. I told him it was temporary. You're too valuable to lose, I said with a grin. He bought it. Of course he did. Khrushchev? Different strategy. I promoted him. Yes, promoted. Made him feel safe. Secure. Gave him new duties, new reach, but also new eyes watching his every move. He didn't know every document he touched was a trap, every phone call monitored, every assistant handpicked by me. I wanted him comfortable, because men like him make mistakes when they relax. As for Nadezhda, I changed. I stopped talking to her about work. I stopped asking where she was going. I gave her the space she thought she wanted. And that terrified her more than any interrogation would have. You know what happens when a liar realizes they're no longer being chased? They panic. She started talking more, telling me about meaningless nonsense. Markets, food shortages, theater plays. I'd nod, sip my tea, and pretend to listen, all while wondering how deep her betrayal really ran. One night she said, "You've been different lately. Quieter." I shrugged. Maybe I'm just content. She smiled at that. Relieved, as if she truly believed she'd fooled the devil himself. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about consequences. Let me set the stage. Moscow, mid-autumn. Leaves turning, frost flirting with the morning air. I decided it was time to give Nadezhda exactly what she thought she wanted. A voice. There was an upcoming cultural symposium, one of those long, self-congratulatory party events where bureaucrats droned on about the soul of the worker. Normally, she'd just attend. This time, I pulled strings to have her speak. She was flattered. Confused, maybe, but mostly thrilled. You want me to talk about ideology? She asked. I nodded. Of course. You're brilliant. Let them hear you. She spent 2 weeks writing that speech. Wouldn't let me read a word of it. Said she wanted to surprise me. She had no idea. What she didn't know was that the audience had been curated. Half were hardened Stalin loyalists. The other half? The people who already thought she was too opinionated, too modern, too eager to poke holes in the legacy of revolution. I even invited Khrushchev, put him right in the front row. I wanted to watch him squirm. And then it happened. She stepped on stage in her tailored blue dress, that smug intellectual sparkle in her eyes. She started soft, talked about unity, about art. Then she said this. There comes a time when fear must no longer be the foundation of progress. When blind obedience to any one man, however powerful, becomes the death of a nation's soul. Boom. The air turned to ice. You could hear a pin drop. Khrushchev shifted in his chair like his pants were soaked. I sipped my tea, slow and silent. She didn't even look at me once. Which meant she thought she was brave. But what she was finished. The press reprinted the speech word for word the next morning. I made sure of it. She thought I'd try to suppress it. No, I let it spread like wildfire. Let the party chew on it. And chew they did. By the next morning, Nadezhda's name was everywhere. But not in the way she'd imagined. Wife of the General Secretary suggests tyranny at the heart of Soviet progress. Subversion or thought leadership? Whispers of treachery behind closed curtains. She had stepped into the lion's den and thrown a raw steak on the floor. And me? I just sat in my office, flipping through each article slowly, like reading letters from old friends. One of my aides entered, pale, and asked if I wanted a formal denouncement drafted. I said no. Let it marinate. By midday, the party was eating itself. Some were too afraid to comment at all, which was smart. Others were lining up to disavow her, suddenly rediscovering their loyalty to me with the kind of desperation you only see when people smell blood. But she wasn't prepared. She came home that night, and the first thing she said, after slamming the door, was, "Why didn't you defend me?" I looked up from my chair. Calm. Cold. From what? You know what I meant in that speech. I know exactly what you meant. That shut her up. For a moment. Then came the tears. Then came the excuses. You don't listen to me anymore. You shut me out. I wasn't criticizing you, just the direction everything's gone. The lies. The spin. The desperate flailing of someone who thought they could ride the storm and realized they were the lightning rod. I let her rant. Then I stood up, walked past her, and paused in the doorway. Nadezhda, when you challenge a god in his temple, don't act surprised when the altar collapses. I slept in my office that night. I needed space. I needed distance. I needed to finish setting the trap. Because what comes next? That was never about punishment. It was about finality. Here's the thing about Nadezhda. For all her big ideas and talk of liberating minds, she never expected the blow to come from her own circle. She thought the party might bite. She thought I might distance myself. But she never expected Zenaida, her best friend since university, to turn on her. Zenaida, syrupy voice, fake modesty, always one step behind Nadia like a shadow in heels, came to visit her 3 days after the symposium. I watched them from the hallway. They hugged, cried, poured tea. It was sweet, almost human. Then Zenaida asked the million-ruble question. Why did you say it, Nadia? Why go that far? Nadezhda, desperate to justify herself, opened up. Said things she should have never said. Things like, I thought someone had to say it. He's paranoid. Controlling. Half the time, I wonder if the revolution even means anything to him anymore. She wasn't even whispering. She forgot who she was. Forgot who I was. Zenaida nodded along, offered a sympathetic pat on the hand, and then, just 2 hours later, was in my office with a full report. She handed it over without flinching. I'm loyal to the party, she said. I didn't need her loyalty. I needed confirmation. Proof that Nadezhda wasn't acting out of passion or a moment of poor judgment. She'd meant every word. And now it was recorded, transcribed, signed. When Nadezhda came home that night, I was sitting at the table with a single sheet of paper in front of me. She paused. Read my face. Her voice was flat. What's that? Your future, I said. She picked it up. Read her own words, in her best friend's handwriting. She sat down. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just looked at me and said, So that's how it ends. No, I told her. That's how you ended it. I'm just the editor. She didn't sleep that night. I did. Like a baby. Because after all the whispers, all the gaslighting, all the insults wrapped in silk, she finally understood. And I hadn't even touched her. Yet, it wasn't over for her yet. Some people collapse when they're cornered. Nadezhda? She tried to wriggle out through a crack in the wall, one last pathetic attempt at control. She went behind my back. I only found out because Molotov's wife, God bless her fear-fueled loyalty, told me over a vodka-soaked dinner that Nadia had asked her something strange. Do you think there's a way to appeal to the Central Committee without him knowing? That's what she said. Word for word. Nadezhda thought she could call a vote. That she could quietly build some soft coalition of disillusioned wives, minor officials, faded intellectuals, whatever brittle souls she could collect, to publicly denounce my influence on the arts. She framed it like some cultural reform. But we both know what it was. A coup. In pearls. By the time she started writing her little memorandum, I already had 5 copies of it. She kept it in her dresser, folded under a stack of sentimental poetry books, thinking I wouldn't look there. I didn't just look. I studied it. Her arguments. Her tone. Her desperation. She was careful not to mention my name directly, but the subtext was clear. Unchecked concentration of power, emotional repression, ideological stagnation. It was me in every word. And so I did something uncharacteristic. I waited. Let her send it. Let her deliver it to the committee. Then I had Beria read it aloud in the next meeting. In full. With her signature at the bottom. I wasn't even in the room. That was the point. By the time I walked in, 20 minutes late, casual, calm, her name had already been dragged across the coals. Half the men wouldn't even look me in the eye. The rest were practically sweating vodka. I hear my wife has concerns, I said, smiling. How fortunate we believe in transparency. Nobody laughed. After the committee meeting, Nadia changed. Not dramatically, but enough that the household felt colder, quieter. She stopped arguing, stopped pretending. One afternoon, she came to me, not with fire in her eyes, but with something that felt like defeat. "Joseph," she said softly, "maybe I was wrong." I didn't smile, didn't soften, just nodded. Maybe. We didn't speak about it again. There was no grand reconciliation, no promises made, just a silence heavy enough to fill the Kremlin walls. That's when I realized something. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. And maybe, in some twisted way, neither was I. I felt no joy in her fall, only a sharp sting of sadness. She had been my partner, my confidant. But the lies, the betrayals, they had changed everything. In that silence, I made my decision. We would remain married. Because divorce in our world is a weapon used only when absolutely necessary. But I would no longer trust her. I would watch her. And if she stepped out of line again, I knew the next move. From that day on, trust was a thing I reserved only for the shadows, and even they were watched carefully. Nadezhda's every move became a chess piece I studied. Her words measured, her smiles rehearsed. The warmth we once shared was replaced by a cold, calculating distance. It was survival for both of us. She tried to reclaim influence in small ways, suggesting changes, aligning herself with artists and intellectuals. But I knew better. Every gesture was a test, every alliance a potential threat. Instead of confrontation, I chose observation. I let her think she still had freedom, while tightening the noose quietly. It was like watching a wolf pacing its cage, unsure when the door would close. And somewhere inside me, beneath the weight of politics and power, I mourned what we lost. The trust, the partnership, the love. But regret was a luxury I couldn't afford. It wasn't a public betrayal this time. No speeches, no letters, no whispered conspiracies. It was a private one. Late one evening, as Moscow slept under a heavy blanket of snow, I discovered her secret, something I hadn't seen coming. A hidden correspondence, not with a foreign agent or a political rival, but with my own closest advisor, a man I trusted more than most. The letters weren't lengthy, but they were enough. Plans, complaints, grievances, all under the guise of seeking counsel, but clearly plotting behind my back. The sting wasn't just in the betrayal. It was in the who. I confronted Nadezhda that night. Her eyes, for once, weren't filled with defiance or lies. Just exhaustion. "I was lonely," she whispered. Lonely. The word hit harder than any accusation. I felt anger. Deep, burning rage. But also a cold understanding. The woman I had once believed in was lost. Adrift in a world I'd built, but no longer shared with her. That night, I made the final call. She was to be removed from all official influence, stripped of privileges, and watched closely. Not because of politics. Because sometimes the greatest betrayal is the one closest to your heart. Sitting alone in the vast chambers of power, I realized how much betrayal had shaped me, not just as a leader, but as a man. Nadezhda's lies, her bitterness, and her final act of treachery were wounds that never truly healed. They taught me that even in a world where control is currency, trust is the rarest and most fragile treasure. I learned that love, when mixed with power, becomes a dangerous game, a game where emotions are weapons and alliances shift like sand. But more than that, I learned to guard my heart as fiercely as I guard the state. Because the most painful betrayals aren't those from enemies outside, they are the ones from those who once stood beside you. To anyone reading this, caught in the storm of deceit or heartbreak, trust carefully. Speak honestly. And remember, sometimes the hardest battles are fought within your own home. After all this, what would I say to someone walking the same treacherous path? First, never ignore the first signs. The quiet sneers, the subtle half-truths, they're whispers of a storm. Second, don't rush to anger or revenge. In my case, patience was a weapon sharper than any sword. Let the truth reveal itself. Third, protect your own peace. You can't control others' lies or betrayals, but you can control how deeply they wound you. Lastly, accept that some relationships are battles with no victors. Sometimes, letting go is the strongest act of all. If there's one thing this life taught me, it's that power and love don't mix well, but wisdom lies in learning to survive when both are lost. Thanks for reading my story. I never thought I'd share this side of myself, but maybe, just maybe, there's a lesson in it for all of us. Stay strong. Joseph.